In this video, I will be discussing the plot diagram used for fiction stories. This video will help you to understand the definitions of each element of the plot diagram and also apply that knowledge to stories we have previously read, as well as the book we are currently reading, The Watsons Go to Birmingham. This video will address some very important I can statements. The first is, I know and can explain the parts of a plot, including exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. And the second one is, I can understand and explain the plot in a text in order to infer the theme. So with the first I can statement, we're just looking at the basic definitions. I can know these definitions and I can explain them. I can identify these different parts in the story. And then the second I can statement, we're looking for it to take a step further and saying, okay, I can understand, but now I can understand and explain this plot in a way that helps me to infer the theme. All right, so the first part we are going to look at is the first I can statement of I can understand the different elements of the plot. So in order for us to understand that, we really need to have a good definition. So the first part we're going to look at is the exposition right here. So the exposition is typically the beginning of the story. In the exposition, we are going to be looking at the setting. So the setting tells where and when the story takes place. So this could be where in the country, where in the United States, where in whose house it is, and when. When can be the year that it is, the time of the year, the time of day, anything. The situation and climate, what's happening, what's going on, what is the climate like around that time, and then the characters are going to be who is in the story. So it's just going to tell you who is in the story. The next part that we are going to look at is the conflict part. So the conflict part right here is really going to look at what is happening in the story. So what is the problem? What is the conflict that is going on to get this story started? So we have the protagonist and then we have the antagonist. The protagonist is usually the main character. And then the antagonist is the force that is against the main character. So this is the force that's fighting against the protagonist that is creating this conflict. The next part we're going to look at is the rising action. So the rising action builds us up to the climax. It's an important part of the story. So without the rising action, we wouldn't have those events that led up to the climax, and therefore we wouldn't have the climax or the most important part of the story. So rising action is going to be defined as the events that lead up to the climax. Now, what I usually tell my students is that when you are looking at the plot diagram, start with the exposition and then look at, okay, what was the most exciting point? What was the climax? And then you're going to be able to fill in the rising action and the falling action based on these two items. So the climax is going to be the most exciting part of the story. It is also going to be a lot of times the turning point of the story. So what that means is when the story shifts or when the story changes, that's going to be the climax of it. What is it? When is it that the characters' thoughts change or their feelings change or something that happens to them makes them think of something in a different way? And like I said about the falling action, that's the next one we're going to look at right over here. We'll highlight that in green. So the falling action, again, is different elements events that lead up to the resolution. So we're going to say events that lead up to the resolution. Or you could even say that lead down to the resolution, because you're coming down from that climax, that most exciting point. And then if we go over here to the resolution, this is where the conflict is resolved most of the time. It's not always resolved. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And it's the ending of the story. Now, with all of these different elements adding together, we can look at all of these different parts, and as the second I can statement says, we can then go down and we can infer, okay, what was our theme? How do we know what the theme is based on all of these different events that happen? And in order to do that, we need to know all right, now that we have talked about the different elements and different key terms in the plot diagram, we are going to look at it in terms of the story that we are reading right now called Watsons Go to Birmingham. So we haven't finished the story, so we're not going to be able to fill in everything. But we can start with things like the exposition and maybe the conflict and maybe part of the rising action, maybe one or two events. So let's start with setting, and let's think about what we talked about before, the where and the when of the story we know so far. So far we have the where, which is Flint, Michigan. And we also are in the Watsons' house at the very beginning. We go around the different town and we learn about the different characters in their school and their friends and things like that. So the next part is the situation of the climate. We know that it's in 1963. We know that there are three kids, two boys and one girl. And they kind of are in school, they're at home, they're in the neighborhood. And then this also touches with the characters, as with the situation and climate. The characters, we have Kenny, we have Byron, we have Mama, we have Dad, and we have the little sister. Okay, so for right now, this is about all that we can add in, but as we build up, we will be able to fill in the conflict, we'll be able to fill in the rising action, and at some point get to the climax. Now that we've reviewed the different parts of the plot diagram and how this plot diagram fits into the Watsons Go to Birmingham, we are going to review our I can statements to make sure that we have an understanding of what it is we talked about. The first is, I know and can explain the parts of a plot, including exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. And the second one is, I can understand and explain the plot in a text in order to infer the theme. Both of these are very important I can statements, and I think we've accomplished that goal. Thank you for watching my video, and please let me know if there are any questions that you might still have.